Hello, everybody. Welcome to your AFCB College Football Podcast. I am your host, Jens, and you are tuning in into a very unique episode of the AFCB CFB podcast. Usually, we dive deeper into whatever transpired over the past weekend, but not today. Today, we are doing a very special interview, at least for us people in Belgium. None other than Max Chadwick from PFF joins us today. He's one of the premier experts on college football over at PFF. He has his own podcast as well. It's called Preferred Walk On. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. So be sure to check that one out after this one. Welcome, Max. Thank you for taking the time to be here as well out of your pretty busy schedule. Glad you could join us.
Of course, man. I don't know if I'm a premier college football analyst. I really appreciate it. That's very kind words from you. But yeah, man, I know we've talked a lot over the course of the season, honestly, and I'm really excited to finally talk to you in person.
Yeah, me too. We've actually indeed been talking a bit. You're quite active on Twitter, so people who are into the Twitterverse, you can find the handles below on the screen here as well. Is that your day-to-day job, being on Twitter, creating social media stuff, or what actually is it what you do most during a day?
Yeah, so my actual job at PFF, I'm a social media producer. So what I do is I handle a lot of the social media for our main Instagram. So that's what I get paid for mostly. And then on the side, really, I'm a college football analyst. I'm kind of their lead college football analyst a little bit right now. So I write about 4 articles a week for PFF on college football. The kind of, the same 4 articles you're going to see. I always do a preview of the week, of the upcoming weekend. I always do a top 25 teams after every weekend. And I always do the highest graded players at every position after every week. And then the other one is kind of up in the air. That one usually changes week to week. But I do 4 articles a week, and then we also do 2 podcasts a week too. Like if you mentioned, Preferred Walk On, me and Dalton Wasserman. So that's PFF's college football podcast. So we record 2 times a week, Monday and Wednesday. Monday episode is kind of, up in the air. Like I said, the other articles. The Wednesday one is always a preview of the 5-ish biggest games of the weekend. So yeah, I do 2 podcasts a week. I write 4 articles a week. And then I also handle all the posting basically on the main Instagram for PFF.
It's quite a busy job. I mean, explaining it even takes you a while to get through everything you're doing in a day. But usually your week usually kicks off after Saturday. So it begins on Sunday. You probably watch as many games as we probably do here as well, like 7, 6, whatever at a time.
Yeah.
And
I
then
do. It's crazy. The PFF I'm lucky enough. PFF offices, the TV can go to 4 different games at once if you want it to. So I usually go into the office every weekend because that way I can watch, 5 games at a time, basically, at PFF's offices.
Imagine being able to say that you're going into the office to watch football.
Dude,
I mean, we're usually leaving the office to do that one.
It's the greatest job in the world. I always joke with my mom because my mom, I used to always talk about football so much as a kid, and my mom would set a cap on dinner conversations. Like, all right, Max, you can talk about football for 5 minutes. Now I was like, listen, I should probably turn this into a job. I love it this much. So now it was funny because like my mom would always get mad at me if I wanted to watch football instead of doing something else that we needed to do. Now it's like, okay, I have to watch football because it's actually my job now. So that I have a pretty good excuse now for wanting to watch every game.
What do you think about spring weddings? Is it?
Spring weddings are good. Fall weddings are
those are your favorites, right? Fall weddings are the ones
weddings, Yeah, I have a girlfriend right now. I've been dating for a while. I don't know when we're gonna get married, if we are, but if we do, we will definitely not have a fall wedding because those should be absolutely illegal. It's ridiculous to even have a fall wedding right now.
Yeah, it's usually a topic that picks up around the summer, and the invitations start coming in for weddings a bit down the road. You see the ones you have to decline, probably have to get a bigger gift.
Yeah.
All right. we can keep talking actually about what you or what an analyst does day to day, but it's still a college podcast. We want to give as many information to the listeners as possible without going into 5 hours of podcasting, which would be pretty easy to do so. The one thing that's usually like the main topic of a podcast that we're doing is prospect talk, because that's actually the reason we got into this, knowing who's going to come into the NFL in April, who to watch, which are the outsiders, dark horses to get maybe sneakily into the first round, end of day 2. Um, do you have one favorite prospect at this moment? You're saying like this one is if my team can get him at any certain position, take him.
Ooh, good
It's
question.
a very broad one. I mean, you could probably name 5 off the top of your head, but
So I was in a very lucky position this offseason. I was able to interview a ton of players. A lot of them are top prospects now, like
mm,
Caleb Williams. I was able to talk to Olu Fashanu, Joe Alt, guys like that, Jerzon Newton, Chopper Robinson, like a ton of guys that are going to be top 10, top 15 picks, first round picks eventually. So I really love talking to all those guys. And just kind of humanizing them, because a lot of times in PFF, the guys are all, we have so many numbers on them that they kind of become a number in some ways.
mhm.
So it's really cool to get to know them as people, because they are people at the end of the day. So my favorite, the one guy I want my team to get, I would say I didn't talk to this guy, but I would say the guy who I'd be probably most surprised by if he fails in the NFL is either Marvin Harrison Jr. or Brock Bowers. I didn't talk to either of them, but I think those two are Brock Bowers might be the greatest tight end prospect of all time. I think he could go down. Unfortunately, he's down with an injury right now, but once he comes back, once he finishes out his college career, we might look back and say that is the best tight end college football has ever seen. I think that his career has done enough that I think you can make that without sounding hyperbolic. Marvin Harrison Jr., I mean, it's crazy that he's the son of one of the greatest receivers in NFL history, and nobody even brings it up anymore because of how special Marvin Harrison Jr. is. He's his own player now. He's standing on his own 2 feet. So those are the two I would say are, I hate saying bust proof because you never know in the NFL draft, but those are the two I would probably say is if they bust, then I might come on and say, I don't know what I'm talking about anymore because I thought those two were as safe as it can get pretty much.
Yeah, they're pretty much generational. That's probably a term we
exactly.
could use. It was a label we didn't fully say last year with Bijan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you still had Saquon Barkley, who you kind of put at the same level. So we're not talking generational for Bijan. Marvin Harrison Jr. and Brock Bowers, it's indeed, as you've said, they're on another planet.
Yeah.
Not even tier. Let's call it another planet.
It's another planet, man. You look at, and you talk about generational. The last receiver prospect you can maybe stack up against Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, you might have to go back to Calvin Johnson in 2007. Like that's how, and we all know how great Calvin turned out to be. Calvin, AJ Green, and Julio were really highly rated. But I think Marvin's better than Jamar Chase was coming out, and I love Chase coming out of LSU. Amari Cooper was very, very hyped up coming out of Alabama. I think Marvin's probably even better than that. I think the Marvin Harrison Jr. Heisman hype is kind of absurd right now, but I think as a prospect, generational. And then Brock Bowers, I mean, I think he's better than Kyle Pitts. And then if he's better than Kyle Pitts, he might be the best ever because we all thought Kyle Pitts was the best tight end prospect ever. So, Brock Bowers is truly special too.
Yeah. Do you see, I mean, for Marvin Harrison Jr., we kind of know he's locked into probably top 5 because we know there's a team there who's going to reach for him, if we can call it reaching, because you don't have like these 5 QBs that you want to have in the top 5. Mm-hmm. Is Brock Bowers a prospect that will go down in the first round, the top 10? Or
I would say I don't think he's going to go top 5, even though I'd probably take him top 5. I think he is the second best non-quarterback in this draft and worth the second non-quarterback taken in the draft. And I think, so I would say, he might be he might be my number 4 overall prospect behind Caleb and Drake and then Marvin Harrison Jr. I probably have Brock Bowers right behind them. So I would say he deserves to be a top 5 pick. Do I think he's going to go top 5? No, I don't think he's going to be a top 5 pick. I think he should be a top 10 pick. I would expect that. Anything after top 10 is an absolute steal in my opinion. I mean, anything after top 5 is a steal. But if he goes 11 or lower, I think that is one of the slam dunk home run picks of the draft.
Will it be a bigger steal getting him after 10 than Jalen Carter at 9 previous year at the Eagles?
Good question. I think it would be because at least right now, there aren't any off-field questions with Brock Bowers that we had with Jalen Carter. So that's why I think it is a little unfair to be like, oh, Jalen should have gone 3 or 4, because there were a lot of circumstances outside of football that were questionable. Thankfully, nothing has happened since, and he's been a superstar. And he's been and listen, if nothing
Probably
happened,
the best rookie, right?
he's easily the best rookie. I think he's easily defensive rookie of the year right now. I would have taken him over Will Anderson Jr. off field. Like if you take away off field concerns, I think he should be the first non-quarterback taken in the draft because I thought he was that special of a defensive tackle prospect. But yeah, I would say Brock might be a bigger steal only because there aren't really any concerns with him that there were with Jalen Carter. So yeah, if he goes in the Jalen Carter range, I'd probably say that is less understandable than what Jalen Carter fell.
Yeah. At least now we know there's going to be 2 teams drafting in the top 10 who are not taking QB, who are going to be very happy taking any of these 2 prospects. I've seen Brock Bowers mock to the Bengals when they were kind of bad in the beginning of the season.
Can you imagine, dude? Oh my God. Ooh. That would be Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and we'll see if they keep T. Higgins or anything like that. But with Joe Burrow throwing the ball too, man, that offensive line's improved. Yeah, that's insane. I don't know if the Bengals will have that high of a pick because I think they're really turning it on right now.
Yeah.
But if they do bottom out for some reason, that would be maybe the most ridiculous receiving core I could imagine.
Probably the best pick fit-wise as well.
Oh, easily,
for Brock
they can
Bowers.
Definitely use them, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about prospects, only 2 prospects for about 5-10 minutes already. And there's like 100 other guys we could talk about. Is there a class this year that's standing out above the rest? Because we have a few pretty strong classes. Is there one where you're an absolute, this will be a slam dunk, most of these rookies will probably succeed class?
Yeah, I think the one position where I would say is probably by far the strongest is offensive tackle. I think this is a truly special offensive tackle class. Now, I am in the minority here. I know Trevor Sickleman disagrees with me. I know Connor Rogers disagrees with me. I know most draft analysts disagree with me. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a draft analyst, so they probably know more than me. I'm in the minority. I think Joe Alt's the number 1 tackle in this draft. And I don't even think it's particularly that close either. I think he is what he can do as a pass protector, what he can do as a run blocker is special. And he's been a better pass protector than even Olu Fashanu this year. Now, I know Olu is a better mover than him, and he's a special mover. And I interviewed both of them, so it's not like I have bias to either Alt or Fashanu. I love both of them as people, and I think they're both special players and deserve to be top 10 picks. But I think what Alt does as both a pass blocker and run blocker, he was the best tackle in the country last year as a sophomore. He's, again, the best tackle in the country this year as a junior. Fashanu is a special pass blocker, don't get me wrong, but I think his run blocking still needs a lot of work. I just don't think he's that mean in the run game. He's a fluid mover, much more fluid than Joe Alt. And the ceiling could be higher with Fashanu. But I think what Alt has shown in 2 years is rock solid. But don't get me wrong, if you pick either of them, I'm not going to complain. They both should be top 10 picks. And after that, man, Talisa Fuaga has really raised his stock as well. We have him as a top 15 prospect. I'm a lot higher than J.C. Latham than Trevor is. I think he could be a really good tackle in the league. Graham Barton, another guy I interviewed, I think he's a really good tackle, guard, center, whatever you want to play him in the league. I think he might not be a tackle long term. Amarius Mims has maybe the highest ceiling of any tackle in this draft. I mean, he could be a special player. So, yeah, there are a lot of players. I mean, Patrick Paul has played really well. Jordan Morgan from Arizona. If you need an offensive tackle in this year's draft, this is the year to get it, man, because this is the strongest tackle class I can remember, and it's headlined by Alton Fashanu, who you can make an argument Alton Fashanu might be the best tackle since at least Penei Sewell, maybe even further than that. So both of them. So I think it's a really special class. It's got superstars at the top, and they got really, really good depth in the first round as well.
Yeah, I think Trevor even had Olu going 1 in one of his latest mock drafts, but it was a no trade mock draft. So granted, it's probably not going to be him, but tells you a lot if a tackle goes number 1. And I mean, either Fashanu or Alt, whoever's going to get these guys are going to be very happy that having these guys securing the edge of the offensive line. Is there a class you're not that hyped about? Is there one you're maybe it's maybe a bit too top heavy or depth wise not too great?
That's a good question. I think it's a pretty weak running back class. Last year was obviously very strong with Bijan, who, listen, I'm a Penn State fan. Saquon Barkley is my favorite player ever as a Penn State fan. But I would even say Bijan Robinson is a better prospect than Saquon Barkley was. Like I thought he was special coming out. So and then after that, you're going back to maybe Adrian Peterson in 07. So that's generational fits the term for Bijan Robinson. This year's running back class is pretty weak. And honestly, the number one running back on PFF's big board right now was the number 3 running back at Texas last year in Jonathan Brooks, who's had a great year. But it just shows Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson were both ahead of him on the depth chart. That kind of shows kind of the weak running back class that it is, where the number 1 guy in this year's draft was the number 3 guy in last year's team. Yeah, I know he was younger for sure. But, Jonathan Brooks, he's good. Blake Corum is good, but he hasn't been as good as he was a year ago. Donovan Edwards has kind of had a really disappointing year, which I hate because he was one of my favorite interviews. Trey Benson's also been kind of disappointing. Again, one of my favorite interviews. Marshawn Lloyd, I think, is really underrated. Braylon Allen, really underrated as well. But, yeah, it's a weak running back class. They're definitely I don't even think I'd take a running back until late second round right now. I think and that has a lot to do with positional value. But also, I just don't think there's one worth taking in the top 40-ish. But that, and then defensively, you got to look at the linebacker class. I don't think it's that strong either. The interior offensive line class is a little weak too, I would say right now.
Yeah, noticed that one as well.
Yeah, there are guys stepping up. Jackson Powers Johnson's a guy who's really made a lot of money this year, I think. But I'd probably say the number one I would probably go with is running back, though. I think it's after an amazing class last year, I just don't think you're definitely not going to see 2 running backs go in the top 15 like you did last year.
No, that was pretty exceptional, and we knew it at the time it would be exceptional as well. I think indeed running back class should be probably the lowest because you're also not really sure what you're going to get with the first one, and we're not sure who's going to go 1 for running backs. What I do think, however, is that there's a strong possibility these will pan out as running back 2s on a lot of teams, because you've mentioned them, Jonathan Brooks, Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards still will have something of a workload at a team in the NFL, which will prove very fruitful. So in a sense, I'm not that hyped about running backs, but I would be kind of glad if one of those could actually land on one of my teams.
Yeah.
So I'm a Vikings fan, so we could use the help probably at running back. If one of these guys could join the group, I'd be very happy. So I think if you're looking into fortifying a running back duo, which you could maybe use to get into the playoffs and maybe have a stronger duo threatening the defense, I'd be very glad to take one of these. Indeed, as you said as well, the interior defensive line, Johnny Newton is the one you're probably most excited about, and rightfully so. But then after that, it's probably a bit guessing as well. Do you see one of these going in the first round still, or do we look into day 2 picks then already?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, I was even saying the interior offensive line class too, and then the defensive line class though. Like I love Johnny Newton. He's a guy that I actually have remained pretty close to after interviewing him. He's an awesome kid, dude, and I think he was one of the top D tackles last year. He is one of the top D tackles this year. I would take him in the top 10. And he told, like, there are very few players who I talked to who would tell you why they came back to school and give you an honest answer. He was the one who was honest. I asked him why he went back, and he was like, dude, I was looking at mock drafts. I was not in the top 2 rounds. That can't happen. I need to go back to school and be a top 10 pick. So I think he deserves to be a top 10 pick now. Another guy who I love is Leonard Taylor. I think he has maybe the highest ceiling of any D tackle in this draft as a pass rusher, especially. So he's another guy that I think could be a top 20 pick if he keeps it going. But after that though, it does get a little murky. But Jerzon Newton is definitely a guy that I would stand on the table for and say we need to take this guy in the top 10.
Yeah, we've actually managed to get through probably most classes coming into the next year without talking about the quarterbacks. Yeah. It's pretty exceptional to me to have a draft discussion without talking about quarterbacks. Do you have one you're probably taking first? Are you in the Caleb Williams camp, or are you going Drake Maye and maybe lighting a bit of fire on social media in the upcoming weeks?
Interesting. I'm taking Caleb first.
Yeah.
But the gap is closing between him and Drake Maye. I think the gap is closing. There have been some concerning things that have come from Caleb Williams' game this year. Now, I still think he's played really well. Look at me. It's not like been a bad year for him. He still played really well. But I think he's trying to do too much right now. And I think if he has that mindset going into the NFL, it's going to be a rough rookie year for him. If he's trying to make a home run every single time instead of taking the singles and doubles, that's going to be something he can't do in the NFL. Drake Maye has been pretty lights out. Even though they lost a couple games, Drake Maye actually was the highest graded quarterback in the country over those 2 losses, which is insane. It just shows you how bad the UNC team around him was in those 2 games. I would take Caleb over him. I think Caleb, what he can do out of structures is still phenomenal. I think his ceiling is still phenomenal. Do I think he's a Trevor Lawrence, Andrew Luck prospect? No, I don't think he is. But I think he's kind of like a Kyler Murray kind of prospect, both in terms of how they play, in terms of how good they are. So I think he's kind of on that level. Drake Maye, I could definitely see a world Drake Maye is better. I think Drake Maye, you can make an argument, might be a safer prospect, just because I think there's a world where Caleb could just be doing too much out there. But I think Caleb's talent, he still deserves to be number 1. But I mean, I do think the gap is closing, and I'm very interested in seeing how Caleb finishes out this season. So I would still take Caleb number 1. I still really like him a lot. But I think the gap is closing for sure.
Yeah, I think indeed, if you would have had the discussion or the same discussion at the end of last year, beginning of this season, I think the answer would be pretty clear from everybody. You take Caleb Williams 1. Indeed, you've seen him doing stuff this year that you didn't see him do last year. It could actually mean also that he's learning. But the one thing I keep remembering is his interception he threw against Colorado.
Yeah.
At the end of the game, he was already kind of his momentum was going forward game wise, and you saw him forcing the ball where he didn't need to be, where he didn't need to force the ball because everything worked out all the time, and this time it didn't. So it could actually be good for him that he's having this kind of, not saying off year, but lesser year than last year. So he's actually getting a little bit more preparation into adversity for next year. That's also how you could look at it, learning how to deal with adversity. And I think he's in the best situation to learn that under Lincoln Riley.
Oh, definitely. And I hate even saying down year because there have been quarterbacks who've had down years. Yeah. He's still been one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Don't get me wrong. That's how special he is because he entered his freshman year and he had the best freshman season since maybe even better than Trevor Lawrence. He was really good at Oklahoma that year. Sophomore year, obviously everyone knows he won the Heisman Trophy. So the hype was ridiculous for him, and he didn't take a next step forward. It's been a half step backward, if you even want to call it that. So that's why everyone's kind of low on him. But it's like, dude, he's still one of the best quarterbacks in America right now. It's not like he's playing bad. It's just he's not progressing like we wanted to see from him. So it is hard to progress though when you are the best quarterback in America last year. But I know a lot of people have been saying down year. I catch myself saying it too. But it's like a down year for Caleb Williams is still a quarterback that everyone in the country would take pretty much.
Yeah. Do you have any other quarterbacks going in the first round this year? Because that's probably a bigger discussion even than who do you have one or two.
Yeah, good question.
You have a lot of interesting prospects, but you also have like kind of a lot of side notes as well with every single prospect that you can name from this point on.
Right. I think Michael Penix Jr., the year he's had, I understand he's a 6-year senior. I understand he has 2 torn ACLs in his past. But he's been special. The one thing I think people need to remember, though, Michael Penix Jr., I think a lot of people are kind of crowning him as QB3, and I'm fine with it. I probably would say he's QB3. But another concern that I don't think gets brought up a lot with Michael Penix Jr., besides the age and injuries, he is playing maybe in the most quarterback-friendly offense in America right now. Like, he has one of the best receiving corps, if not the best in the country. That offensive line is protecting him at one of the best rates in the country. And then you got your head coach in Kalen DeBoer, who I think is one of the best offensive minds in the sport. And then Ryan Grubb was an offensive coordinator that Nick Saban tried to poach last offseason, and he couldn't do it. So I think he is in a very, very quarterback-friendly offense. I do think he's phenomenal. He was really good at Indiana, too, so it's not like he just came out of nowhere. But I do think that that's a concern that needs to be brought up. Bo Nix is kind of the same thing, where Bo Nix is playing in a very quarterback-friendly offense, but he's been really good the last 2 years. I've really been impressed by him just kind of stepping up and being a system quarterback a little bit. Whereas at Auburn, he was a gunslinger. You didn't know what Bo Nix was going to do on every play at Auburn. But he's been a lot more playing within the system. JJ McCarthy, I think, could be QB3. I just don't know what the heck he is right now. He hasn't played anyone this year. He's not playing anyone this weekend. And now the Penn State game, the Ohio State game, the playoff, if they make it there, which I think they will, that'll be the test for him. Then we'll say, okay, who are you? Who are you really? Because right now, JJ McCarthy looks like one of the best quarterbacks in America. The problem is we don't know who the heck he is because he hasn't played anyone yet. So I think he's a guy. Shedeur Sanders has played really well. I think he could be I don't think he's going to declare this year. I think he will go back to school for his senior year, but he's really impressed me. He could be QB1 next year, honestly. Last one I want to bring up is Jaden Daniels. He is a guy, I think his career progression and his career arc reminds me a lot of Jalen Hurts, where if you remember, Jalen Hurts at Alabama could not throw the ball. They did not want to throw the ball with Jalen Hurts at Alabama because he simply couldn't do it. That was kind of like Jaden Daniels at Arizona State. He could not throw the ball. He was a great runner, and Jalen Hurts has always been a great runner, but he couldn't throw the ball. Then Jalen Hurts goes to Oklahoma, becomes one of the best passers in the country, goes to the Eagles, becomes a perennial MVP candidate like we know him now. Jaden Daniels goes to LSU last year. He was a great runner, a lot better as a passer, but he also was very conservative as a passer. He didn't push a ball downfield. This year, Jaden Daniels is the best deep ball thrower in the country out of nowhere. I don't know where this came from Jaden Daniels. I have been blown away from him being a guy who could not throw the ball his first couple years. Now, all of a sudden, he's the best deep ball thrower in America after being a conservative quarterback. His progression is amazing. I would not bet against that guy in the NFL. I think he's firmly a second-round pick. I could see him. I don't want to put the Jalen Hurts comparison on him because Jalen Hurts is amazing. But I could see the career progression and just getting better every single year. And I think it's Jalen Hurts-esque, man. I would not bet against Jaden Daniels. And if he beats Alabama tomorrow, he's your Heisman frontrunner by a mile, in my opinion.
Even more of a favorite than JJ?
Yeah.
Because I think he's the frontrunner right now, JJ McCarthy.
I don't think JJ will have the stats to win it, which is, as a PFF guy, I hate that because the counting stats is not a metric that should matter all that much. But for the Heisman voters, it will matter. The stat I actually found, which I think is crazy, JJ McCarthy has only dropped back to pass 4 times in the fourth quarter this season. 4 times. That is less than his fourth-string quarterback. The fourth-string quarterback at Michigan has more dropbacks in the fourth quarter than JJ McCarthy. So he is getting benched in the third quarter because they're beating out teams by 30 already. So I'm excited to see when he finally faces adversity. Like I said, I just don't think JJ will have the stats, the counting stats to warrant it, even if his grade is the best in the country. Maybe even if he does deserve it in my eyes, I can't see the Heisman voters giving it to him with the stats that he's putting up because he's not playing the second half of most games right now.
Yeah, I think you actually bring up an interesting topic. In Michigan, they're not playing anybody, but like you said, you probably expect them in the playoffs. Is this one of the teams that you cannot label as of right now going into the next few weeks? But before we go on, for people who are listening to this now, I think this will probably be put online somewhat next week for us. So now we're November 3. So if anything happens in the upcoming weekend, don't shoot us, don't add us, unless it's to retweet the podcast. But do you think that Michigan will be able to move on in the offensive category, that they're actually blowing people out and stopping them on defense into the playoffs?
Yeah, I think they can. I picked Michigan to win it all before the season, and I still think they're winning it all right now. I still think they're the best team in college football. I think what they're doing offensively is phenomenal. I think what they're doing defensively is phenomenal. I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more complete team in college football right now than Michigan. Again, they've played nobody. Okay, they haven't played a top 25 team yet. That'll change next week when they play Penn State, and obviously at the end of the season when we play Ohio State. But I think they look like the most dominant team in college football right now. I think them and Georgia are kind of head and shoulders above everyone else in college football right now. I still think Michigan's the best team in America. I would rank them number 2 only because they haven't played anyone. But I in terms of how good they actually are, yes, I do. Even with all the stuff off the field going on right now, I still think Michigan, at the end of the day, is going to be your national champion.
Yeah. Do you follow then, if you're not putting them at one, do you follow the CFP ranking and put Ohio State there because of strength of schedule? Or are you following most of the people and putting still Georgia at one?
Yeah, so my top 25, I put out, I put Georgia at 1, I put Michigan at 2, Ohio State at 3. I just think right now the resume will take care of itself at the end of the season. Then you go strictly by resume, in my opinion, for finding 4 teams worthy of going. I don't think you look at how good a team is. I think you just look at who are the 4 most deserving teams. I think that's what the playoffs should be. And it might sound weird for me to say that's not how it should be right now, but I just think it'd be weird to put Georgia, Michigan lower than that. And I think, listen, the resumes aren't good. Georgia has a big resume game this weekend against Missouri. But I think Michigan will have, well, if they beat Penn State and they beat Ohio State, they're either going to be number 1 or 2 in the country, and they deserve to be number 1 or 2. Georgia will be the same thing. Georgia's got some huge games coming up between Missouri, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and then probably Alabama or LSU in the SEC title game. So that I think right now I put Georgia 1, Michigan 2, and then Ohio State 3, Florida State 4, Washington 5 right now.
Yeah. Washington 5. They're out of the playoffs. Luckily, next year we're moving to the expanded playoffs. We're looking at the 12-team playoff picture then. Are you in favor of the expansion right now? Is it too much? Is it too little?
I always struggle with this because I completely understand the argument on both sides where the best part of college football is the regular season, because really the entire college football season is like a playoff, really. Whereas like if you lose, you're pretty much done, you know? So that'll be lessened a little bit, but it'd also be cool to see more teams have a chance at the playoff. Because you look at any other sport really in the world, the playoff doesn't really, you don't, it's like starting the playoffs at the semifinals. It's like that's a little weird. So I like the 12 team. I'm excited to see what it will bring. But I do understand the argument of if the regular season could be lessened a little bit. But I also think that the regular season will also be heightened by the fact that, the number 16 or 15 team in the country, all of a sudden their games are very important at the end of the season. So even though like Georgia and Michigan's games might not be that important and at the end of the season, which will stink, you'll also see a lot more teams have an opportunity, which will make it more exciting, I think, at the end of the stretch, at the end of the season. So I think I'm excited for it. I'm for it. I'm happy they're doing it. I'm happy to see it expand, especially as a Penn State fan, because now that we'll finally be able to make the playoff. But I do think I think it will. I think it'll be a good thing long term. I think it will be a good thing for college football.
Yeah, I've had a lot of discussion about this expansion with my co-host Alexis. He's in favor. We're both in favor of the expansion. That's sure. But I'm a bit more in favor of maybe an 8-team playoff. He is in favor of the 12-team playoff. And then my argument is actually what you've said already. It puts more emphasis on the regular season, because indeed college football is all about the regular season.
Right.
I had in mind with the 18 playoff, we're looking into next year, so we have 4 conferences. We're still waiting to see what the Pac-2 will do next year, if they're going to join another conference or not, or if they're going to battle it out with the 2 of them. But you have the 4 Power 4 conferences champions going into the playoffs. You have one of the group of 5 who's going to be in the playoff, and then you have 3 wildcards.
Yeah,
and then anything is up. And I've actually made the comparison today with Tennessee last year. They would be in the 12-team playoff next year if they were to finish 2022 as they did. But losing to South Carolina would mean they are out of the 8-team playoff. And that was kind of interesting to me. You put the emphasis, you can lose one, but you put the emphasis on still winning all your other games.
Yeah, I kind of would be with you. I think the 12 team is a big jump. It's a big jump from 4. I kind of like the gradual, you go from, first of all, college football once never had a national championship game. It used to just be you play your bowl game, and at the end of the season, they vote and they say, this is the national champion, which is awful. And then it became a 2-team. Then it became 2 teams where they say, okay, these 2 teams deserve to play for the national championship. That happens. Then it became 4 teams. Now it's going to 12. So it's a huge, it used to be double every year. Now it's just going triple what it is right now. So it is a big jump. And I would have probably liked to see an 8-team as well, to see how that will go, and then make an adjustment from there. Maybe you go from 8 to 12 or even 8 to 16, maybe if you want even more. But yeah, I think it will lessen some of it, but also at the same time, you'll get so many more teams. And also, a big thing that is happening in college football right now, a lot of the top players are not playing in bowl games that aren't the college football playoff. With the 12-team playoff and with an expanded playoff, they're going to play, because they could have a shot at a national championship. So that'll be cool. Like Caleb Williams could still make a 12-team playoff this year, hypothetically. He would play in the bowl game or wherever they play too. So that'll be cool too, to see teams do that. And also, it'd just be really, I think it'd be a good thing for college football long term, honestly. And I'm for it. I understand the arguments against it, but I am very for it right now.
Yeah, me too. Anytime you give me more college football to watch, I will be glad.
Yeah.
This is not going to be a punishment to watch the extra games. Not at all.
No.
Yeah. And the regular season will still be fun because a lot of teams lose their maybe 1 or 2 games. You're not out, but it puts a lot of stress on maybe not losing a third one. And we had a lot of teams last year losing 3, and they would be out completely.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And like, again, like when it was just the BCS and it was only 2 teams, the end of the season was just like, okay, we have 3 or 4 teams that we're really caring about how they win or lose, because these are the 4 that can be. Now we have like 10 teams that can make the college football playoff. With a 12-team playoff, you're going to have like 24. So I think, again, the massive games like LSU, Alabama, or another game like that, maybe it would be a little less important because you say, oh, okay, even if we lose this game, we can make it. But I also think that you have a lot more other games where it's like, okay, we have to pay attention to what Air Force is doing right now. We have to pay attention to what James Madison eventually, hopefully, will be able to do. It's BS what's going on with them.
Yeah. How many years until they are eligible for the playoffs? Is it next year or
next year? Okay. They are. But I think right now they deserve to be the favorite to be the Group of 5 team in a New Year's Six Bowl. I think what they have done is more impressive than Air Force. It's more impressive than Liberty. Is they can't even compete for an SEC, for a Sun Belt championship. Awful rule. I think it's terrible, and they deserve to be. They're not even ranked right now in the college football playoff ranking because they're not eligible for the postseason. I would rank James Madison. I think I had him 16 in my ranking. Like they are knocking on the door of the top 15 right now for me at least. So I really like them. But yeah, like I said, man, it's just, again, for some people, they think the regular season will be lessened. I actually think it'll be heightened, man. With so many more teams that can make the playoff, there'll be so many more games at the end of the season that you have to care about, which would be, I think that'll help a lot too. Because I think it's helped a lot with the 4 team, and that there are so many more teams you got to care about, and there'll be so many more games next year. There's so many more teams next year that you have to care about too. So I'm excited for that.
It's as you say, like the big games will probably matter a little less than they would do this year, but it will be the second tier games, as we could call them maybe now, with teams in the top 15, top 20 who are still battling for that last playoff spot. Right. That will be pretty intense to watch. I think we're almost out of time. We're at 38 minutes. I've actually promised myself to keep it under half an hour. We're usually doing this. We're saying we're going to be under an hour, and then we go on for an hour and a half. Is there something that you would maybe like to share with people in Belgium? Is there something that we can look forward to in the upcoming months at PFF or at the podcast?
Ooh. Good question. I would say if you guys want to watch more college football, obviously, other than this show, obviously, but if you want to watch our show, Preferred Walk On, again, like I said, it's on YouTube, anywhere you get your podcast too. We do a preview every week. We do any other week, anything big in college football, we talk about it. So in the off season, we're going to be really, really busy as well. Because I think we can at PFF, I think we can cover the transfer portal pretty much better than anyone else right now. And we'll cover that. Obviously, the coaching searches would be really fun to get into. And then the draft too. I'm really excited to talk about the draft. We have an idea that we're going to do eventually. And I did it last year as an article for PFF. And actually as a video too by myself on Preferred Walk On. But we're going to do a mock draft, but everybody in college football is eligible for this mock draft. So Travis Hunter, any true freshman in college football this year, anyone is eligible. So that'll be really fun just to kind of see who the 2025 guys to watch are, who the 2026 guys to watch are, in addition to all the 2024 guys. So you can kind of get an idea of, okay, this guy in 2025 might be better than any guy in 2024. This guy in 2026 might be better than any guy in the next 2 classes. I always love doing the all eligible mock drafts. I think those are really fun. So we will definitely be doing that in the off season, during the draft season, really for college football in the NFL.
Is there a prospect you're actually thinking about right now? If we're talking, he's maybe better than the top prospect we have this year, or is it a little bit too soon to already make that judgment?
It's a little soon. I think next year's draft's a lot weaker than this year's. One guy who I am blown away by is James Pierce, the edge defender from Tennessee. He has been unreal as a sophomore this year. It's a great edge class this year. He could push for edge one if he was in this year's draft. I think his size, his speed to power is ridiculous. He's crossing over guys too. I think if you haven't watched James Pierce yet, look at number 27 for Tennessee. He is a superstar. So him, Will Campbell, Travis Hunter, obviously. The next year's quarterback class is very up in the air. I don't know who really QB1 will be. We'll see who comes back to school, because I think a lot of guys could come back to school next year.
Shedeur is aiming for number 1 pick. So
Shedeur, yeah, I think Riley Leonard could come back to school, especially with all the injuries he's had. Michael Pratt is, there's rumors of Michael Pratt transferring.
I saw the Michael Pratt tweet today, and he's actually, it was a rumor up in the air. He's going back to college football next year. He denied the rumor directly, but it could be, there's a sense of logical thinking there. Like, it could make a lot of sense for him to go back to school.
Yeah, definitely. And not even that. The rumor I saw too was he might transfer to a big time school. So, I mean, you're thinking about, Notre Dame was in the transfer portal last year. They could use it again after Sam Hartman leaves. Who knows? I mean, there's a lot of schools that could be losing quarterbacks this year's draft that would love Michael Pratt in their program right now. So he might be the top quarterback in the transfer portal this offseason, honestly, if he does decide to enter it. So, I'm excited though. There's a lot of younger guys that nobody really talks about until after this year's draft is over, but we're going to talk about them in our all eligible mock draft. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. If there's one prospect I'm actually looking forward to, then maybe in your piece, in your article, is Zachariah Branch, the wide receiver out of USC. Yep. I mean, this guy has been lights out this year. He's putting on highlights almost every single game he's playing. He's been injured a few games this year already, but I mean, as a punt returner, he's so electric. It's so amazing to see what he's doing. Next year it will be without Caleb Williams, but I mean, any guy throwing to Zachariah Branch will be probably putting up a lot of stats in the game.
Right. Marvin Harrison Jr., I can promise you, will still be the number 1 receiver taken in that mock draft. But after that, he'll be up there. I don't know if he'll be. Another guy. I didn't mention this guy. Luther Burden III is probably wide receiver 2 in that mock draft. The Missouri receiver. Oh my God, man, he is like Deebo Samuel all over again. Like it is insane what this guy does with the ball in his hands. I think if Missouri has any chance of beating Georgia tomorrow, Luther Burden III has to be the best player on the field, because I think he could really. I made this comparison before. Rondale Moore beat Ohio State by himself basically when he's at Purdue. That's kind of the performance I think Luther Burden needs to have tomorrow against Georgia. So he's another guy that I think will be maybe a top 5 pick in next year's draft. I think what he could do at receiver is special. So but Zachariah Branch, I'd probably put in that next tier after that. Probably I could promise Zachariah Branch will probably be a first round pick in that mock draft for sure.
Yeah, for sure. A lot to look forward to, and especially with the NFL draft, we have a lot to look forward to. There will be, for the listeners, more episodes on the NFL draft in the upcoming months. Of course, we're a college football podcast, so we're going to cover it. There's some talks already going on how we're going to do it. There's some talks about new guests, special guests coming back to this podcast. So a lot to look forward to on our side as well. Max, thank you very much for taking 3/4 of an hour to be here with us. It was an absolute pleasure to have this time talking with you. I mean, we could go on for maybe another 2 hours and still have plenty to talk about. But we'll wrap it up here so people who are doing the commute can still listen to the full podcast in their commute. Thank you very much for being here. Sorry?
I said, thanks for having me, man. It was an absolute blast talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. For the people who listen, thank you very much for listening. You can find this podcast on Spotify, you can find it on Apple Podcasts, and you can find the full video of this podcast on YouTube as well. Thank you very much for tuning in, and see you next time. Bye-bye.